Remember the floating traffic jams at U.S. ports? The exploding cost of freight during the COVID period? The shortages that came with it that impacted us at the grocery store, Walmart, where people would stare at empty shelves with a confused look and this growing concern. Some market analysts out there are saying we're basically in COVID Junior. That the supply chain shortages, the supply chain hiccups that were happening back then, we're seeing them happening right now. Echoes, shadows, but all of these little disruptions are causing more and more ripples to flow out and causing more disruptions because of them. We're going to be talking about what's actually happening in the shipping and freight industries out there, because the stuff that comes from China that ends up on your store shelves, the stuff that runs the warehouses and the factories that make a lot of stuff, even here in America, oftentimes originate from around the world. And we are seeing more and more disruptions happening, and people are kind of wondering why that's happening. We're going to dive into it. Welcome to the Poplar Report. I'm Steve Poplar. I'm an accountant by trade, and we dive into deep subjects that the mainstream media doesn't either spend too much time on or doesn't really think is all that consequential. Now, ironically speaking, we're actually going to be looking a lot at a New York Times article that was just posted this week, where I know the New York Times is oftentimes a partisan rag, but when it comes to supply chain, it's relatively even-handed because it's a non-political subject. It's just looking at what's actually happening. And the simple fact is that we're having more and more disruptions happening around the world. Now, of course, we've been covering what the Houthis have been doing is they've been taking pot shots at cargo ships as they flow past, and they've been hitting more and more recently. Now, we've already talked about that. We've talked about the drought in Panama that has limited the number of ships that can come through per day, the Panama Canal. And this is a big deal. Now, while that has eased up recently, we're seeing increasing issues with strikes across the world. Dock workers in the East Coast ports as well as the Gulf ports of the United States are threatening to go on strike, which would shut down a lot more ports than even the collapsed bridge in Baltimore. We got longshoremen in Germany already going on strike right now. And we have rail workers in Canada, especially the cargo rails, they're ready to go on strike as well. These little disruptions, these little issues, whether they slow freight down for a week or slow things down considerably more. We have ships that normally would go through the Suez Canal, but out of fear of the Houthis are going the long way around south around Africa, right? That is causing a lot of ships to be used up. We normally would only need this many ships, but now we need that many ships plus more because the ships are taking longer to get to their destinations. So, same amount of freight, more ships are needed. And that's the situation we're seeing around the world. Not only that, but we're seeing issues with freight cancellations. Because there aren't enough ships, too many containers want to get on fewer and fewer ships, they're getting canceled. They're not able to get on the ships. There's no space on the ships, especially for popular routes from like China to New York, China to Los Angeles, China to other ports inside the U.S. and elsewhere, and to Europe. There's also a shortage of containers out there. They're not able to put together containers fast enough over in China, and they're not getting back as many containers as they send to the rest of the world as they were before. So these are all just causing little issues out there. I mean, just think of it this way. If there's a ship that gets delayed for a week or 2 weeks, that may be carrying a container or may be carrying certain chemicals that are needed by factories in order to make, paper or to make a manufactured process for something. And heck, we know all how much chemicals are in our food these days. One delayed shipment of chemicals can bring a factory to a standstill. And that factory at a standstill can cause other factories to move to a standstill as well. Because a lot of times products move from one factory to the next to the next. When you open up a camera or a laptop or something like that today, or a TV, you'll notice lots of different computer chips. You'll notice lots of different capacitors and other pieces of electronics in there. And oftentimes they come from different factories. And then they all get put together in a factory that then puts those on a boat and sends them to the US or wherever you are. One component going out of stock because they couldn't get certain metals or certain chemicals or even parts for their machines. And so we're seeing these ripples adding up. And like in COVID, where everything just got shut down for a while, and we said that this is going to have a ripple effect, that the shutdown for these couple of weeks means that there's a couple weeks less parts, there's a couple weeks less components for these factories downstream of them. And so it's going to have this kind of tidal wave. You know, when a tidal wave is coming into shore, right? It's very, very small. I mean, if you're a ship out in the ocean, you see this little lump going along and you're kind of like, whatever. That's kind of a little bit bigger of a wave, but no big deal. But as it approaches shore, it starts to cascade and starts to become much, much larger. And that's because the shore pushes it up. It becomes evident how big of a deal this really was. And with the economy having these issues out there, this is causing a much bigger problem than people are realizing. And this time it's building. When COVID happened, it happened and then it just kind of started working its way out of the system. It was like a one wave tidal wave. Right now what we're seeing this buildup. It's like a wave pool where the machine is continuing to go and the waves keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger. That's the situation we have right now. We have this resonating frequency almost where issues are causing more issues downstream and then more problems are happening faster than those issues are being cleared out of the system. And this is causing, take for example, if you want to ship a 40-foot shipping container from China to Europe, just last year it cost you $1,200. A shipping container from China to Europe. Today, that shipping container will cost you $7,000. Now, you do the back of the envelope math, that's a pretty big multiple, from $1,200 to $7,000. And that's not the only route that's being affected. You could be like, well, that's because of the Houthis in the Suez Canal, right? Well, let's look at Shanghai to New York, okay? China to New York. It used to be $2,000 last year. It's now $8,000. And you go, well, that's partially because of the, the Panama Canal. Yeah, it is, partially. But there's also just a shortage of ships. There's a shortage of operating cargo ships. And this is what we see across the board. We're seeing rail rates going through the roof. We're seeing truckers aren't seeing the benefit of this, but trucking companies are charging premiums on moving things inside the United States as well. Freight rates across the board are going up dramatically. And this is going to impact you at your store. This is going to impact you at the grocery store, your Walmart, your Target, whether you're going to a Five Below store or a Dollar Tree, or you're going to something like a Nordstrom, or you're going to some fancy restaurant too. I mean, this is impacting food shipments as well. Restaurants are having increasing issues, right? Just, what was it, last month? I was showing you that Wendy's was out there saying, oh, we're having problems getting lettuce and tomatoes. And we're seeing these fast food restaurants, national chains, they can't even get produce. We're seeing Burger Kings without burgers. It was just nuts. And we're like, where is this all coming from? There's nothing big. There's no big COVID thing happening right now, shutting down the entire economy. But we're seeing these ripples all over the place. And I can't stress enough, the problem is deeper in the economy. We've become over-reliant on things on the other side of the planet. And then we tried saving as much money possible and shipping that stuff from over there to over here. We've cut corners cost-wise so much that we've created a system that is inherently unstable. And we thought we could get away with it. In our arrogance and our pride and our hubris, we thought we could get away with it. And the simple fact is we're finding today, as factories are desperately trying to leave China to go to other places like Vietnam, Indonesia, India, they're running into a lot of problems they didn't expect. They're running into different cultures. They're running into different supply chains. I mean, you move your factory to India and you're like, hey, this is great. It's cheaper than China, and we don't have all those China sanctions, and we don't have the trade war happening and everything like that. And then they realize how many national holidays they have in India. They realize that, the power just kind of goes out relatively frequently in India. That if you're trying to run a factory and the power goes out on you, that could be quite a problem. And we see these people, these factories moving to different places in the world, and it's not going as smoothly as they would have hoped. And that's causing ripples happening out there. Just the transition from a factory in China to a factory somewhere else means that the factories are going to be down for certain points of time. They're going to have to train new workforces. There's going to be hiccups all along the way. And we have some of that manufacturing coming back to the United States. Not all that much, but when that happens too, that means prices are going to be impacted upwards. We had all these cost savings when we moved our factories over to China. And now as we're moving them to other places, we're starting to realize that those cost savings are transient. They're going to go away. All this to say, the ripples that are happening out there, they are continuing to happen faster than our systems, our freight systems can handle them. And they continue to escalate. And this is before anything big happens. When something big happens, you're going to see that this shaking house of cards is going to come crashing down hard. We're in COVID Junior right now, as one logistician said. They called it little COVID Junior because it's like COVID, the freight disruptions and everything like that, but not nearly as bad. But what happens when World War III breaks out? What happens when Israel goes into Lebanon? And I'm not saying if, I'm saying when. When they go in. That's what we're seeing now. What happens when Iran gets more outgoing with wherever they're going to do that more? Whether they send troops into Yemen, that's a possibility. They could send troops into Yemen. They could send troops into Lebanon. They could send more troops into Syria. All these things are possibilities that are going to dramatically impact shipping out there. What happens if Russia starts giving hypersonic missiles to the Houthis or to Lebanon and the Hezbollah? We don't even know. And these are the little tiny skirmishes that people aren't even thinking about. What happens if China goes to take Taiwan? Computer chips around the world, production lines are going to come to a crashing halt. The electronics that are out there in the world are going to be the electronics that are going to be out there for a time being. If Taiwan carries out its threat to actually destroy the computer chip manufacturing systems in Taiwan, that means we're going to run out of computer chips real fast. Semiconductors. Anything electronic, friends, is going to suddenly come to a stop. And the only electronics going to be out there are going to be cheap Chinese electronics. Because China makes computer chips and silicon chips that are way less sophisticated than the ones that go in cell phones, the ones that go in laptops and computers these days, tablets, cars. Those all come from Taiwan. The bad stuff, the stuff that doesn't do anything new, that's, we've been making those things since forever, like televisions, as long as they're not too smart, like dumb televisions, dumb screens. Those computer chips, a lot of them are made in China now. And they will be able to continue manufacturing them. But even just thinking through all of those things, how many production lines will come to a halt because of the invasion of Taiwan? whether they succeed or fail, they're going to make sure that those computer chips aren't flowing to the world. And so that's going to cause problems for us. A major nuclear confrontation over Ukraine. What happens if some nukes get thrown back and forth? The panic that will ensue. Remember back when we had people running to the store and grabbing toilet paper and the buying panics that happened? Imagine that at stores when people realize that a nuclear weapon has been deployed in Ukraine and people start to freak out. Normals that do not watch the news, that do not keep up with things. When they start freaking out, are they going to go to the store and stock up? Probably. And when they do, the shelves are going to be empty. And that's going to wake up more people who are going to panic and buy more stuff. And the supply chain can't handle a sudden burst of interest in items that don't usually have as much interest. Ramen noodles and canned goods and other shelf-stable products, because the market's built around fresh food. And when people don't want fresh food, they want to stock up on all the canned goods. It's going to be a hard time coming up with all that steel, coming up with all that metal for the cans. The market's not going to be able to support that. You're going to see empty shelves for a while, and that's going to freak people out. People are lemmings. As long as things are good, they stay calm. But as soon as things go sideways, they start making all sorts of irrational choices. And like I'm saying, ripples are happening right now. The freight system, the supply chain is unstable right now before a major crisis happens. And we're looking at a bunch of major crises that could happen any day now. And this is a big problem. This is why we keep saying get stocked up. Make sure you have food on hand for your family. Make sure you have extra that maybe you can share with other people. But get stocked up. Because times that are relatively good right now are going to turn for the worse inevitably. Why? Because hard times follow good times. I mean, how long are the good times going to last? I don't know. But the good times come to an end when the hard times start. And we've had relatively good times. But out there, more and more people are having hard times. Right? We're hearing about it. We're seeing it. We're experiencing it. People's budgets aren't lining up anymore. And this is causing supply chain issues, but personal stuff hitting the fan issues. SHTFs, right? Personal SHTFs. And we are going to campaign hard on this channel to keep changing it to stuff hits the fan, right? Anyway, thanks so much for watching. If you want to check out another video from this channel, there's one right up here. I'll see you over there, and we'll talk some more about what's going on in the world. Thanks so much for watching. Steve Poplar of the Poplar Report, out.